All right, the cricket rolls on. Interesting that on the same day as those excellent test results came in, South Africa's women beat Australia in a match, any format, any kind, for the first time, which I kind of knew that in the back of my mind, but it was still surprising that they've never managed to knock off Australia in any format, even in T20 cricket. It was a T20. They're playing the third match of the T20 series as we're speaking right now. In fact, in the third game, South Africa they made a good score, 162 for 7, and Australia might be running it down. They've got 4 overs to go, and they need 36 and 24 balls. So maybe we'll get a grandstand finish while we're talking about this. But the first game of this series, Adam, usual Australian thumping, ran down a target with only 2 wickets down. Beth Mooney, 72 from 57, and Elisa Healy hit the gas pedal at the start, 46 off 28. And so Talia McGrath, while not very fluent, was able to just cruise along and make 24 slowly. Only 2 wickets to fall, chasing 148. But then South Africa turned around and took them down in the next one.
Yeah, and I'm glad it's with their bowlers. Like, we spent so much time over the years saying that it's South Africa's seam group who one day could win them, maybe a tournament. And they nearly did. They nearly won that World Cup final against Australia last year in this form of the game. They've made a couple of 50-over semi-finals. They, of course, performed so admirably in the 2020 tournament of the T20 format when they nearly beat Australia in the semi. But it's bowlers like Marizanne Kapp, who continues to be the gold standard for seam bowlers around the world, Muzabata Class, Nadine de Klerk, players that we sort of track the career of and feel like we're invested in them doing well, but coming together all in this game. They all went for less than 6 and over, which meant they contained Australia suitably, and then their batters did the rest.
Yeah, I mean, it was Grace Harris got away in that game, 31 not out from 18 balls, and took down the last over that Kaka bowled. But yeah, Mlaba, Chloe Tryon, they all went at a run a ball or less, and kept Australia to 142. And then Tasman Brits, who often struggles to get moving. So she made 59 not out in the first game, but at just over a run a ball. She struggles to get that strike rate above 105, 110. But she got moving in this game, 41 from 28 balls, and that helped them get underway. And then Laura Vulvart basically saw them through with 58 not out. A few drop catches. There were a couple of caught and bowls that went down, and Grace Harris had one long on where if she'd been a metre back, she only had about a metre to play with on the rope, but she might have, if she'd had her heels on the rope, been able to hang on to it. But so there were a couple of chances in there. But at 4 wickets down, they did it relatively comfortably in the end, South Africa. And, yeah, like I said, batted well again today. I was watching that first innings before we started recording, and Marizanne Kapp was absolutely belting them. I thought she was on for a ton at one point. She got to 71 off about 40 balls and then just slowed down. A wicket fell at the other end and a couple of singles, and there were just a slow couple of overs, and she ends up getting bowled by the Talia McGrath slower ball for 75. They managed to take the pace out of her innings by not bowling to her for a period of time. So anyway, she's set them a decent score, but Australia have Gardner and Mooney at the crease, both absolutely motoring at this point. So it looks like they're on to win it at this stage.
Also worth acknowledging that this is Laura Woolvart's team now. All the off-field drama last year with what you would say premature retirements from Shabnam Ismail and Deneva Nikirk, which is more complicated yet further. But and then the captaincy moving 2 or 3 times in the space of a year and landing with Laura Woolvart, who you wouldn't have said, well, she's a senior player in the side on the basis that she's been there since she was 16, but still in her early 20s. But she has a chance to mould this in her image, and they need that kind of stability, having had a fantastic captain in Van Niekerk leave the building entirely. So the fact that she saw them through with 58 not out in that second game, and I know she fell cheaply in this one, but this is interesting, and a lot of cricket to come because it's a multi-format series, and there'll be the Test match at Perth in a couple of weeks from now, which we won't be at, I don't think. Will we at there before? I'm trying to remember. How does that work with the sequence with New Zealand? Might be before the New Zealand Test, right?
Yeah, it's a while. It's about a week before it ends. About a week before the New Zealand Test. I'm flirting with the possibility of being there, but I may also be getting kicked out of my house around that time and having to move house. So if that happens, we're waiting on final confirmation of dates. Thus, there's a little insight into into what's going on behind the scenes. If I can be there, I'll be there. If life intervenes, I won't.
We will try and do daily shows from there if we can.
Definitely be doing daily. So I'll do the daily by hook or by crook, but it's just whether I can actually get over there.
Terrific, Jeff. You did jump on a plane and fly to Sydney last week for your game at Birchgrove, now an annual affair, the third time the final word has played the Newtown Browns and the third time that we've won it. So we're not undefeated anymore, having lost in Melbourne in December, but I guess north of the Murray north of the Murray, full stop. Never lost in England. And a little bit like that thing with Ollie Pope's batting average, south of the Thames versus north of the Thames. Anyway, why don't you tell us about the game in 30 seconds?
Well, the only consistent factor is that the only game when you and I have both been there, we've lost. So I don't know if that means anything, but
okay. Noted.
I can't do it in 30 seconds. It was an absolute belter. It ended up being a 2-run result. I mean, Peter Lewis and the Newtown Browns are a team of gentlemen who play in the right spirit, as they say. It was a bloody hot day. We won the toss and asked them to bowl first, which was probably a bit rude to do, given that it was, very humid and 35 degrees. It wasn't a final word 11. We had 17 players available that day. 13 batted and 15 bowled across the course of the innings. So we sort of rejigged the innings in consultation with Pete Lewis on the fly. So it ended up being a 34 over innings, which meant that we got all of our players a hit for at least a couple of overs, retired quite a few of them. Raman, our wicketkeeper at the top of the order, retiring. John O'Haley made 24. The retirement score was 25, and then he got bowled, having a big heave when he was one day away from retirement. Very nice to see Jono batting with Louis, his son, in the middle order as well. So that was nice to get them together for a hit, and then some terrific play down the order. So our scorer, Sarah Berman, came off the bench and came into the middle for a bat. Had to be retired because no one could get her out. Jeff Quinn made a quick 20-odd down the order. Terry Hogan was running like Dean Jones, turning blind, hustling back for the seconds. Andy Casely as well came in and batted at 13 and hit a couple of crucial shots, including like an uppercut off the last over of the game somehow. And he was like, I've never played cricket before in any competitive sense, and yet pretty much played the shot of the day. So we made 174 in our 34 overs. They had 34 overs as well with, I think, 12 players, but then they had injuries happening, so we were going to have players batting twice if it came to that. They didn't lose enough wickets for that to happen in the end. And we were feeling pretty good at about 20 overs in until a fella came in whose nickname was Maxi, and that should have been a clue because he absolutely got onto us and just started clattering the ball around Birchgrove. And he was hitting our best bowlers as well. That was the thing. I've got bowlers that I know are a go-to, and he was finding ways to find the boundary off them. Two, there was a big partnership in the middle order. And this was after there'd been some very frugal spin bowling as well. So Sarah Berman had a bowl, Helen Maynard Casely had a bowl. So the first women to play for final word teams, which was a nice development to have. Both should have had a wicket, but they unfortunately a couple of catches went down. Two of many catches that went down that day, I can tell you that much. And then. And so that spinner's point through the middle was very frugal, and then the point where our more established bowlers were coming back on, they were getting carted, and I was like, well, we're actually going to lose this. So 4 overs to go, Adam, 15 runs to defend, 24 balls in hand. I'm like, well, we're in trouble here. Steggs came on, our left arm orthodox spinner, bowled a beautiful over, only went for 3, really, really held it up, but still, it was 12 needed off 18 balls. Surely we were done for, and then salvation arrived in the form of Raman, who was keeping wicket. I said, get the gloves off. You're having a bowl. And he bowled a sensational outside off stump, fast, swinging away. No one could lay bat on him. Went for 1 run off his over. Suddenly it was 11 off 12. Louis comes back on. He bowls a beauty, takes a wicket, gives away very few. They needed 6 off the last over, though, and even then I thought I'll probably get him. And Raman just does it again. Couldn't lay bat on him. Got to the point where they needed 5 off the last ball. Had to try to smack a 6 down the ground. Couldn't do it. And the final word gets home by 2. So a thriller. We had a thriller in the first year we played. I think the Browns needed 9 off the last 2 overs then, and we managed to defend that. And this time, goodness me, it was heart-stopping stuff.
Yeah, and 2 of the 3 years against the Oval Dream Boys have been final ball finishes. When the first year they needed a boundary from the last ball, and we restricted that. And last year, of course, the wild tie where we got 2 runs from the last ball to square it against them. So there's a theme emerging here. If you're playing with, how did you manage the caps? Because was there enough? Because I know we bought a box of them. Do we have to get some more?
Almost. We were a couple short because we had 17 players. So I think we got 30 all up, and I reckon we had 13 play in Melbourne and 17 in Sydney, but a couple must have gone to somebody else. So I think we need a couple more of the baggy golds to fill up those who missed out.
Mine is sitting up on my shelf of the office here, my baggy blue final word cap next to the baggy gold. So they'll get work out. They'll get work again in 2024 for us because we're playing the Dream Boys game. We haven't quite got in the diary yet, but we're just organising fixture lists at the moment. And the Edinburgh Tour, I know we're talking a lot about Edinburgh at the moment. We'll again in a second in relation to the half marathon and the marathon. But the Edinburgh Tour is happening as well. We've made a bit of progress on that. That'll be in probably the second week of August, and that'll probably be 4 games. So quite a bit of final word cricket this year.
And one particular mention for Keith Bannerman, who carries on the Bannerman name proudly, who you met at our Sydney live show, who rocked up. So Sarah brought the frog box so we could do a video stream of it. Keith brought not only recording and broadcast kit to make sure that we could live stream the game, but also a couch and a generator and all of the equipment that we needed to do live commentary. So there was live commentary of the game on the speech channel on the Discord. So if you're on the Talkies channel, you could listen to 2 or 3 or 4 people sitting on the couch doing live comms of the game as it happened, and players swapping in and out of there, doing post-innings interviews and so on. It was amazing how this thing has grown. You know, we had spectators, we had tech, we had scorers, we had refreshments being run by Jono. It was, it was a wonderful day, and there must have been 40 people down there for a social game rather than the usual bare minimum of struggling to get 22.
Sounds like how the Big Bash started, Jeff, when Joey Johns was walking out to bat for New South Wales. And the Big Bash happened to finish this weekend with we kind of left it where you left it last week with 2 games to play. The preliminary final where the Heat were playing the Strikers, and then the winner of that to play the Sixers, who won the second semi-final. So in the prelim, the Heat win by 54 after making 214 for 7. Josh Brown, what a story this is. 140 for
this innings, man.
With 12 sixes. I've seen the highlights, and I don't profess to have seen the whole thing, but the highlights looked absurd. So they win that game by 54 runs. Spencer Johnson takes 3 for 20. Then in the grand final at the SCG a few days later, he does it again. Brown, 53 from 38. Renshaw in support for the Heat, and they get the job done comfortably over the Sixers, who are bowled out for 112. And again, it's Spencer Johnson who's player of the match with 4 for 26. So it's the Brown and Johnson show. But let's just go back to Josh Brown, who, he's a club cricketer for northern suburbs in Brisbane grade cricket. He's been called into play for the Heat at age 30, and he's now signed with Chattogram in the Bangladesh Premier League. And who knows, that this could be. We've spoken a lot about fairy tale stories on the final word this week, not least Shamar Joseph. This might be another in a different way, on a different form of the game. But I suppose this is what the Big Bash does. It does give a platform for players to come from the clouds.
Chattogram, he might be able to get Lisa some braces, and like maybe he's the next. I don't know. Maybe he's Tim David Mark II, right? Like the player that just grooves this one style of the game, where you can just come in and belt the living shit out of the ball in short form cricket, and that can earn you a very good living these days. So there's the possibility. I was watching the 100 that he made. I mean, it was just brutal. It was a little reminiscent of was it Craig Simmons, the fella's name, who came in from grade cricket for the Scorchers. It was a bit like that. He had a very straightforward way to play. It was a way that it emanated the vibes of grade cricket. It suggested somebody playing a T20 at a local oval, which isn't to say that there wasn't skill in the shots. It wasn't agricultural. It wasn't just having a wild mow, but it was a basic range of shots, and shots played in a basic way. It was like there's no need to get too fancy with finesse and technique here. We're just here to hit the ball out of the ground, and by God, it worked in that game. It was quite the thing to watch.
So in terms of the team of the season, the only player, no, there are a couple of them, my apologies, the players who were given unanimous billing were Matt Short, Aaron Hardy, Jamie Overton, who was the overseas with the Strikers, and Xavier Bartlett, who's now made his way into the Australian one-day side. Other players who were there of note: Chris Lim, back to the peak of his powers with the Strikers after moving clubs. Jake Fraser-McGurk, who's now getting a one-day cap. Paul Walter, he's 2 meters tall, you might have heard that. And Matt Kuhneman, who we saw a lot of in India last year, but can do it with the white ball too. Lance Morris, who is playing one day as next week. And Cameron Boyce, who's a good story. Cameron Boyce, you and Brat spoke about last week, but known for the 17 runs off one over back in 2015 at Cardiff when Mo and Ali got hold of him. But
19, I think it was.
There might be another chapter in his career. Time will tell. So in domestic cricket, we go back to the Sheffield Shield in about a week from now. I note that Will Pucovski signed for Leicestershire. And talking of Shield players, he's going to be there through the month of April, replacing Vian Mulder, who presumably is on a holiday somewhere with Dana Scully. But yeah, Will Pucovski, getting his first chance to play county cricket, having been at Weybridge in the Surrey League comp last year. And he'll be the kind of player who people are watching pretty closely. Now we've had Warner's retirement, and we don't really, obviously, Usman Khawaja's not going anywhere soon, but I wouldn't rule out. I wouldn't think it's impossible to conceive of Will Pucovski coming straight through the middle and being the next Australian opener and overtaking a bunch of them, because they've always had their eyes on him. And the one test that he did play all those years ago, he did look the part. So he'll get his next chance for Victoria and then off the Grace Road.
Well, the other question is, cricketers get injured. That does tend to happen. If there's an injury in the middle order for Australia, does that mean Smith goes back down to the middle and they pick an opener, or does that mean they pick somebody to come in to the middle and keep Smith where he is? I suppose if it's Renshaw, it doesn't really matter because they can swap and switch around as they like. But yeah, the Pucovski getting hit the other last week playing that Vic's second 11 game, but then sort of apparently coming through that okay without a concussion. Yeah. It was a story when it first came through. The assumption that he'd been concussed again, but apparently that wasn't the case.
Well, there's clearly underlying anxiety for him around this when he copped a little whack last year. Doing a warm up in Adelaide, and the story later came out that this was mostly his anxiety contributing to, and that's perfectly understandable given everything he's gone through. Playing it safe with Pucovski stands to reason. I think he was on 89 at the time as well. And just on Smith, by the way, the fact that his name is now added to the list of players that have carried their bat in Test cricket, which is 30 times, I think, in Test matches. And Smith, in his second match opening, goes straight on there. So another little bauble in his extraordinary career, even if the returns have been diminishing somewhat in the last few years. I didn't see much of Smith's innings because much of it was when I was asleep on Sunday. But by all reports, it was in the circumstances pretty special. So looking forward to seeing how he gets on in New Zealand. Yeah,
it was. There was some special elements of that innings. I suppose, with the benefit of hindsight, giving Shamar Joseph 2 balls at a left-hander after what he'd already done to Travis Head and Alex Carey might not have been a smart move. So that might be one he wishes that he had again, but it's much easier to do that in hindsight. Just as a live update, Australia have won the third T20 against South Africa's women. Beth Mooney, 82 off 55 balls, got out a couple of overs before the end, but Ash Gardner's taken them through. 29 off 17, absolutely put the foot to the floor at the end. Australia get there with 4 balls remaining and 5 wickets in hand.
ICC awards were handed out this week, Jeff, which I don't normally pay an awful lot of attention to, but I think it's noteworthy that Pat Cummins is the first Australian since Smith in 2015 to win the Garfield Sobers Gong, which is kind of like the award, right? It's the best player in global cricket or something like that. Usman Khawaja won the best Test player. Cummins was also the captain of the ICC Team of the Year. Phoebe Litchfield won the Emerging Women Gong. Fantastic to see Chamari Atapatu, captain of the International Women's Team of the Year, Jeff.
Hell yeah.
Heavily invested in Chamari's story for a long time, interviewed her so many times, and finally being recognised in a wider context than just being kind of like the one player for Sri Lanka that can make a match-winning contributions. Pretty cool. So the AB medal is on Wednesday night, which Cummins will absolutely win that. And on the women's side, it's a bit of a Melbourne Cup field. don't really know who'd be favourite. They're probably Ash Gardner because the extra weighting given to the Test match, and she took 12 wickets last year at Trent Bridge. You'd think she'd get so many points there that it would be hard to knock her off.
Yeah, guaranteed to pick up the points in the Test match for sure. But they did play a lot of white ball cricket as well. I mean, she's in all formats, so that gives you a boost as well. Mooney's always somebody who lurks. Litchfield's drawn headlines, but has really only made consistent runs in the last few outings that she's had. So, I'm sure there'll be an eye on her, but I don't think she'll be up there contending. It could be raffled around this year. And I don't know, what's the AB medal? It was, the Alan Border bit is nice. It was nice to hear. So Alan Border was doing some commentary on the Test match as well. It was good to hear him still out there. We know he's got health problems ahead of him, particularly a condition that'll worsen over time. But it was great to hear him on the commentary, almost being interviewed more than commentating, really, talking about past battles with the West Indies, and it all sort of tallied together. But yeah, it's not the most anticipated night of the year, is it? The Australian Cricket Awards.
Yeah, I think it had more of a vibe to it when it was kind of like on Channel 9 at 8 o'clock in the evening. And, it's a different era, isn't it? When it was like linear television and before streaming and so on, it had a bit of a Brownlow energy around it, maybe for 5 years. But now it's sort of one of those things that you'll catch online, the speech from the winner, and that'll be largely that. Jeff, we've got to take one more break, and when we return from it, we've actually got quite a bit to wrap up, including the National Inclusivity Championships that were played during the week. Final word, Adam Collins, Jeff Lemon mentioned going into the break that the National Inclusivity Championships were played between the 20th and 25th of January. This is a terrific initiative. So it started in 2017, and I'm really quite mindful we don't do enough on disability cricket on the pod, but we will try to the extent to which we can to stay on top of these things. But yeah, Victoria claimed the national titles in the men's deaf and hard of hearing tournaments, the women's deaf and hard of hearing, and the cricketers with the intellectual disability division, while New South Wales won their 5th consecutive national title in the blind and low vision division. The only thing I'd say about all of this, and it is terrific, is that where's the physical disability team? This is really starting to stand out now. And we had James Norden and Will Flynn on the pod last year with us from the England side. They're in India right now playing an international series, yet there's no Australian presence whatsoever. So I do hope they can, get on top of that soon, because it doesn't. I don't know why. Why would there be infrastructure to have physical disability cricket not only being played in England, but they've broken off into 4 sort of elite teams. The winners of those 2 semis play in a final that's played on Sky Television and all of that. So they're building something here. They're in India now, having had their tour from 3 years ago from COVID complications called off then. They're finally on the park. They lost their opening game, England to India, by 49 runs on Sunday at Modi Stadium, by the way. It's pretty cool, right? They're playing at the proper, biggest stadiums in India for this 5-game series. So I'll try and get Flinny and James back on the pod to talk about it after their return from India. But yeah, like I'm pleased to see there's far more attention on inclusivity when it comes to cricketers with disabilities. But yeah, the one thing missing from an Australian context is having a PD side out there and hopefully taking on England and India soon enough as well.
It'd be good to direct the questions towards the people in charge of that part of the program to find out what is going on there. Like I doubt it's just a random oversight. There must be some practical reasons behind it, but hopefully that's something that does get addressed pretty soon. Will Flynn and James Norden are both very much linked up with the Lord's Taverners as well, and we've talked about running a lot. I dread it. I hate thinking about running, and talking about running makes me think about running, but there will be people running marathons, and half of them at the end of May in Edinburgh, and we are doing a big fundraising push for the Lord's Tav so they can continue to use cricket to make people's lives better. I mean, that's a thing that, how can we not be on board with that, right? Because they're looking to, particularly to help kids who are disadvantaged or living with disability, to use cricket programs to help promote social inclusion, get kids who've got those issues more social time, and to help give them a brighter spot in their day that they might need.
Just getting constant reminders of their great work as well. We went to the Burns Night dinner on Thursday. I went along with a couple of our marathon runners, including Hayley Fuller, who's organising all the fundraising for this year. So our target's £30,000. And yeah, that pub crawl that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago with Bumble, we're hopefully trying to nail down a date in May for that, a couple of weeks before the run itself. So the 10K is on the 25th of May, the marathon, half marathon on the 26th. We're up to 42 runners, Jeff. It's been an amazing effort from the Final Word community. It's not too late. Get in touch, but it's nearly too late. Certainly on the marathon piece, it's almost too late. Might even be too late, to be honest.
I think it is. I think the marathon's closed. Yeah. I think the 42K is closed.
But what we can do is there is flexibility when it comes to the half, and absolutely the 10K. So look, if you're not a runner and you want to do this, the 10K is very gentle. Saturday morning, we'll all be there to watch. There's a dinner planned for the Friday night, which will be great. The Tabs are looking after that. Then we're doing a big brunch on the Sunday after the half marathon's finished, and we'll go out and have a really good night on the Sunday night before returning to our various places, mostly London, on the Monday. So yeah, be part of that. Get in touch with me straight away, and you can contribute to hopefully a fundraising campaign that gets to roughly 30,000 quid for the Lord's Tabs. We couldn't be prouder to be in association with them.
Under 19s World Cup, have you been paying much attention to this? I've had a little glance. I've had a dabble, but I can't claim to have been deeply across it. There's been a bit too much going on.
Yeah, there is, isn't it? It's one of those tournaments where they keep the teams in as long as possible. So 16 has been reduced to 12. Then they go into two groups of the Super Six. So we're a long way from the finish line in practical terms. Just wanted to note that Clinton Peake's son has been drafted in to the Australian squad. He's only 17. He's already made 1,100 runs for Geelong in club cricket this year. So coming to a Sheffield Shield side very soon, young Peake. I worked with, I guess it was his auntie back in a long time ago now. Yes, he's they're talking big things about Peake from Geelong. So he's now been brought into the Aussie squad as injury replacement, something like that. So we might do a bit more on the 19s World Cup when they get to the business end. Couple of other
headline writer's dream as well. Peake, all of the reaching his peak, past his peak kind of stuff that they can do. That'll keep them in business for years. I'm wondering if there's any family connection to Mervyn Peake, the author of Gormenghast, one of the greatest feats of imagination in the English language. Gormenghast. If you're looking for a book to read, check it out. You probably won't be able to figure out how to spell it, but it's phonetic with a GH in the second syllable, the second G. Anyway, you'll work it out. Mervyn Peake, check it out.
Zafar Ansari can read it along next when he's finished reading the full works of Camus or something like that. Speaking of cricket around the World Test Championship, tests between South Africa and New Zealand, which all eyes are on that for the wrong reasons, sadly.
Yep.
That starts on Sunday at Mount Maunganui. Afghanistan are playing a one-off test match against Sri Lanka in Colombo that begins, I think, 3 days from now. Unfortunately, Rashid Khan won't be part of that Afghanistan side. His back's still fucked from the World Cup, so he's had an operation, hasn't he? I think Rashid Khan on his back, so he's just in rehabilitation mode at the moment. Putting to one side the Afghanistan story that we've talked about in great depth before, the very fact that they're playing Test cricket against Sri Lanka outside of that World Test Championship apparatus can only be a good thing.
Well, it's the way that things are set up at the moment with the WTC, isn't it? That the teams who are outside of it, if you want to play a game, if you want to play a couple of games, you've just got to work that out with each other. You've got to figure out how to schedule it, how to fund it, where to put it on, and it's not going to have any bearing on anything beyond that. But I suppose that's what Test cricket always was up until relatively recently.
Yeah, I wonder whether there might be a world where, I don't know, where there's divisions of Test cricket. The more I've thought about this topic we were discussing before, if it turns out that there is a group of nations who only really want to play each other for commercial reasons, whether there's room for something that sits beneath it, I don't know. There probably isn't, but there might be. There might be. Yeah. Anyway, that's a conversation for another time, I suppose.
Okay, that's enough from us for this week, or at least for the weekly show this week. I'm sure there'll be other things this week because that is the way that we operate in the can't stop, won't stop atmosphere of the final word. Thanks to Adam for being on the show. Why not? It's his show. He might as well be. And thanks to me for being on it as well. Thanks to you for listening to it. Without those three components, the people on it and the people listening to it, there wouldn't be much point doing it. Remember, if you want to play Nerd Pledge, that is patreon.com/thefinalword. And you can also get onto our Discord chat page and become part of the very friendly and nice Final Word online community and an offline community as well, because everybody's meeting up and hanging out and doing things like going to Edinburgh en masse at the end of May. All of the links about the marathon up there are in the show notes, thanks to cbussuper.com.au if you want to sort out your superannuation. And thanks to everybody else involved for sorting the show out week to week, especially DC, who edits the show. Sometimes we don't talk about DC enough, but we would not be here without him.
Quite right. We love you, DC. And yes, those daily shows from Vizag, there'll be a preview on Thursday, then into it again with Cam at the ground with a combination of you and me this week. And on it will roll before we are reunited in New Zealand in about a month from now. All right, this has been season 15, episode 22 of The Final Word. We will catch you again, as Jeff says, very soon.
Later.